Elliotte Friedman, our NHL Network insider. And Elliotte, give us the background. Jim Nill kind of quietly going about his business again.
First of all, I just have to say this. Jim Nill is one of the toughest nuts to crack. Like, he does not make it easy.
No.
They all make it hard from varying degrees, but Jim Nill is on the high end of hard. I will say that when it comes to trying to figure out.
He's nice about it. Very nice.
He's absolutely one of the nicest people in the league, but he is old school, and he does not tell many people at all.
Nope.
So, the thing is, I don't think this really started early in the season. Like, the one thing that Dallas had and Ottinger had here is it wasn't like he was an unrestricted free agent at the end of the season. He was a restricted free agent. He had a contract for this year, so it wasn't like he wasn't playing or they had a countdown at the end of the year. They always knew there was time. And what clearly happened here is the Swayman deal served as the template. And they pretty much went to him after the Swayman deal got signed, and they said, okay, this makes sense for Boston and Swayman. We think it makes sense for us too. And I don't think it took a really long time for this to get done. Ottinger is happy in Dallas, and why not? It's a great place to live. It's a good team. They play good structured defense. They're always a contender. And I think it was an easy yes for him. Also, he's a pretty good golfer, and he likes the golf courses in the area. So why change if you like that?
Yeah, listen, I mean, Elliotte, I don't know why you would change it. Listen, I have a question, though. I mean, we see they've got a lot of guys here signed. They still have to get Jason Robertson done to a long-term deal eventually. But you see the list here, Jamie Benn. Last year of Jamie Benn. What do you think happens with Jamie Benn in Dallas? Longtime captain.
I think, well, Jim Nill said at the beginning of the season, Dan, that as long as he's there, Jamie Benn is going to stay there. And I think that there is an understanding there that, A, the Stars really like Ben. They think he's really important. He's still a very effective player, and he has embraced the young kids. Like, this is a team where the leadership is shifting, right? It's going kind of away from the veterans to the Heiskanen, Wyatt Johnston, Robertson, Logan. Well, of course, obviously you have to mention the number one center too, and then Logan Stankoven is coming now as well. Look, definitely called. So it's shifting there, and I think Ben recognizes that. I think he's very happy there. I think the Stars want him to stay long term. And I do believe they'll work. If everybody wants this to work, I've been told it's going to work. That Ben wants to stay and they want him to stay. But I think what we're doing here is we're kind of figuring out the numbers. Okay, now we know what Ottinger's number is. What is Johnston's number going to be? What is Robertson's number going to be? We know what Hintz is. So I think it's all becoming a piece of the puzzle. And from what I understand, the Stars and Ben are very comfortable with letting it play out that way and finding a good number later.
And fortunately for both parties, the salary cap will be going up, so it gives them a little bit more room moving forward. And I agree with you, having been around Dallas, having used to live there. I mean, Jamie Benn, he likes it there. They like having him there, so I would kind of tend to agree with that. We'll see how it does play out in the end. Elliotte, I want to take you right around our area here, the New York Rangers. There's been a lot of discussion about, Shesterkin. He is in the last year of his contract.
I hadn't heard anything.
Yeah. I had my guy Kevin Weeks here was talking about they turned down a deal. I know you've been trying to track this down as well. I mean, it's an interesting story for sure. What is he going to get? Also with Lafreniere, what's the situation there? Give us what do you know about what's happening with the Rangers right now with those two players in terms of extensions?
I think this. I think that when it comes to Shesterkin, I think the Rangers are going to have to get comfortable with where he wants to go. I think he wants to stay in New York. I think he wants to be a Ranger. But I think there's a way that he and his representatives view the situation, and that is that he's the best Ranger, and he should be paid at stuff as such. And, EJ, I mentioned on our pod this week that what one guy said to me was what he would do is if he was the Rangers is he'd offer them $1 more than Panarin and see if that gets it done. And I don't know that that's happened, but I thought it was an interesting idea. I do think the Rangers are ultimately going to have to bend on this one. The other thing, too, is it got out at the beginning of the week last week, and Kevin had a great scoop. It did create some hard feelings, I think, just about the fact that that got out. I think like there were people who felt that Shesterkin was being made to look bad. They didn't like that, and so I think everybody here has kind of gone back down and tried to be a little bit more airtight. But I still believe at the end of the day he's going to be a longtime Ranger, and the Rangers will just have to bend to closer to where he wants to go. As for Lafreniere, I had heard that one of the issues here that was being discussed was term. And, you know, because if you look at Lafreniere, especially as you mentioned before, EJ, there is a belief the cap is going to go up over the next few years. You know, the fact that there's a new CBA is coming in here too, and what could that mean as soon as next year? Like there are some people wondering if, as the commissioner has hinted, they can get it done early. Say, for example, at the Stanley Cup final, could they change what the projected cap is for next year? It's now at 92.4. So one of the things I'd heard was there was a question about, is it smarter to wait? And number two, what is the right term for Lafreniere? Because max term might take him to a point where he might not get another big deal out of that. So it might end up being a little shorter as opposed to the full 8. But I think one of the other things too is until you really know what Shesterkin's number is, you know, do you wait and make it like another piece of that puzzle?
See, Elliot, it's interesting to me because I actually look at Lafreniere's deal as being the more interesting one for the Rangers. I agree with you. I think they're going to match what Igor wants. They're going to get there. But Lafreniere, he's not on the first power play right now. But in a couple of years, he will be. And that's going to increase his numbers. You could argue that he should be on it right now, but they've got their 5 guys and they've been there together. When his numbers increase, well, that should increase the value that he's paid, right? So why would you tie yourself in to an 8-year deal in that sense if you have a feeling that your role is going to increase and your numbers are going to increase and the cap's going to increase? To me, that makes it more sense almost for a shorter-term deal from Lafreniere's point of view. From the Rangers' point of view, I could see why they would want to go long, but that has to weigh into it, doesn't it?
Dan, you should be Lafreniere's representative because you're giving the case. No, I agree. Like I absolutely agree that the Rangers were talking to Lafreniere. I do believe they wanted to extend him long term. Just, you know, one of the things that someone had told me was, does 8 really make sense for the player in this case? And I think you're right. If I'm a team and I decide that this is a core player, I lock him up for as long as I can, as soon as I can, because the price never goes down.
Right.
But if I was Lafreniere, I don't know if he'd do that, because also it takes you to an age on the back end where you might not be able to hit another one out of the park.
Yeah, maybe it's a Matthews type thing where you do 4 years, and then you're looking at another opportunity. Like to your point, Elliot, you can make some more hay down the road if things continue to go well.
I don't know if you do 4, because that walks you right to free agency, I believe. Yeah. So usually the team will want a little bit more or a little bit less.
Yeah. Yes. I could see that. But to me, I wouldn't. I'm never fearful of that. If I'm running the show there, especially in New York, where people want to play for the New York Rangers, if things are going well with the player and things are going well with the team, I'm not worried about that, because I think that I'll make the deal happen. You know, I can see why in other places maybe they would be, and you want to be careful. But for me, I always feel like it's good for everybody. If the team is doing well and the player is doing well, we're going to come to an agreement. And it's going to end up costing money, but that's the cost of doing business in pro sports, period. And as you point out, like the price always goes up. That's just the way it's been since I've been covering this, and it's been a while. I want to take you out to Colorado because it's been a struggling start for the Avalanche, but I want to get to Mikko Rantanen because he's obviously such an important piece of the puzzle. Like Shesterkin, he's in the final year of his contract. I thought he was another guy. I thought that would have been done like July 3rd. And yet, it's played out now, and here we are into the early part of the season. What are you hearing there, and what do you make of the Avs?
So, like, one of the things that I always talk about is, like, I just ask around, like, what do you think on this guy, and what do you think on that guy? And I remember towards the end of the summer, like a couple teams were telling me they were taking Draisaitl and Rantanen off their free agent board because they just were hearing and they didn't see any way that those guys would leave. And obviously, Draisaitl signed, but Rantanen has not yet. And in the summer, I think I mentioned on one of my pods that teams were saying, "Oh, Rantanen's going to stay in Colorado." I think what's happened is, the Draisaitl contract has raised the bar. And like, I think he wants to stay there. I think they want him to stay there. But whenever the bar gets lifted, and we've gone now McDavid, Matthews, and then we went to, McDavid, McKinnon, Matthews, and now Draisaitl.
Yeah.
We've gone from 12.5 to 14 over the last few years. But also, you also always look at percentage of the cap too, right? Like all those guys are around 15% of the cap when they signed. Panarin was just under. He was in the 14s. McDavid was the highest at 15.72. Well, if Rantanen looks at it that way, his number goes above McKinnon's. And I'm not convinced Colorado wants to do that.
Yeah.
Now, we'll see where this all goes. But, I do think that's an issue here, is that if look, I'm all for people. You argue what you argue. You shouldn't negotiate against yourself. You argue what you argue, and you see where things end up. I have no problem with Rantanen saying, you know what, percentage of the cap, maybe my number should be higher. But I can see where a team like Colorado is going to say, you know what, Nathan McKinnon is our ceiling, and maybe Cale Makar passes that. And not that we don't like you, Mikko, or we don't love you, Mikko, but we don't want to go. We just don't want to do that. And I think that I don't know how that's going to play its way out right now. Again, most people seem to think that he wants to stay there and they want him to stay, but it hasn't been as easy as everybody hoped. And also, don't forget his last one went a bit of time. So I look at it this way. Still, at the end of the day, if you had to get me to bet, I would probably say I expect Rantanen to stay, but I will say this. I think it's been more challenging than everybody here expected. As for the team, guys, they're thin right now. They got a lot of people hurt. They've got a lot of money against the cap that they have to worry about using if Landeskog and when Nichushkin comes back, and they're not getting a save. Like it's I've had people asking me today, like, do you think Jared Bednar's in trouble? And I'm like, I don't know anybody else who can go in right now the way it's going, especially in goal, and could do any better. Like, it just seems a bit crazy to me that we're asking that.
Quickly, Elliot, is there anything on Gabriel Landeskog, anything new that you've heard in your conversations about a time frame here? We keep waiting.
No, and you know what? Like Lonzo Ball played this week. And Lonzo Ball had the same surgery, Dan, and the two of them, it was 2 years.
Yeah.
Like he just played his first game in 2 years. Now, the one thing I do know, Dan, is that at the beginning of the year, Landeskog sounded really confident that it would be sooner rather than later. I was kind of warned about that a bit, like don't jump to any premature conclusions. I think everybody there is hopeful, but I didn't necessarily believe it was as early as kind of everyone hoped. The one thing I can say more is about Nichushkin. Nichushkin is eligible to be activated in the second week of November, so we'll see what that means and where that goes from there.
Yeah, that's going to be also an interesting story to see what happens. And I'll tell you, I miss Gabe Landeskog.
Absolutely.
I mean, he's a great person, but he's a really great player too. And I think that dynamic with Nate McKinnon, I think Nate McKinnon misses having Landeskog there to kind of ease him up a little bit, too, every once in a while. It's a lot on Nate McKinnon, but we'll keep watching that. Elliot, thanks so much for the time today. We appreciate it. Go have a good evening.
You know what? I got to tell you guys, it's very rare when I'm like the collared guy on a set like Dan. Next time I'm coming on, I am coming on in my pajamas.
But you are wearing sweatpants, to be fair.
Oh, come on.
I had to blow your cover. I mean, you got to poor Dan here. I got to defend poor Dan.
It looks great on him, though. At least it's NHL merchandise.
I think he got a bowl of soup with that. I'm not sure. But at any rate, thanks, Elliot. We'll talk to you soon, buddy.